This is Concepts Video 2 for the GeoSketch application. I'm going to be discussing AuxViews and camera models. AuxViews is short for auxiliary views, and we're going to import some video frames to use as our AuxViews. In this case, it's video that was taken from a small aircraft flying around Providence, Rhode Island. It's required when you're using a video sequence that your directories of images are in a directory called frames, and that each frame is named with a frame number. And then in a parallel directory with the same parent directory is another directory called cameras, and for each of the frames there's also a camera file that has the camera model that describes the position and orientation of the camera for that image. We can look at these camera model files using WordPad, and we'll see that it's just a set of 21 numbers. There's a 3x3 matrix that describes the internal parameters of the camera. This includes the focal length of the camera and the image size. It's actually half of the image size. This is a 1280 by 720 image, so we see half of those sizes here. We have a 3x3 orientation matrix, rotation matrix, describing the orientation of the camera, and then a vector describing the position of the camera. What's important to note is that there's an arbitrary coordinate system for these numbers, and that it does not have a realistic scaling, because in this case it was made such that it didn't know the scale of the images, and so therefore we're going to have to scale these camera models when we import them. So in order to import the image, we'll go back up to the frames directory, and if you're going to import just a single frame, you select that frame. But if you're going to import a series, it doesn't really matter which frame you select, it's just getting the directory information from it. And we'll select this frame, and by default we're going to be importing a series, and again, if we only wanted to import a single image, we could select that option. We have the directory path and the name of the image we selected, and then we get to specify which frames we want to bring in. In this case, we'll load in from frame 0 to 180, and skipping it to every 10th frame. In this case it was a flight taken around a city block in Providence, Rhode Island, so there were 180 frames so it's approximately every 2 degrees, and we're going to load in every 10th frame. Now here is the scaling that I mentioned before. This requires some trial and error in order to come up with an appropriate scaling to figure out the scale of the camera models. In this case we'll use a scale of 5,000, and that's a unitless measure. Ultimately it's being converted into inches to import into SketchUp, but we do not have a scale for the images. So we'll click the OK button to import those frames, and we can actually look at them from above to see the flight path that the aircraft took around the city. It's not quite a perfect orbit, but it's fairly good. And we have the ability to zoom in on any one of the images. If you're going to use the orbit tool, it's best to zoom out before you rotate around to another image. But whenever you're in one of the GeoSketch tools, you also have the ability to use the left and right arrows, and it'll frame in sequence through each of the images as we move around. I mentioned that there are context menus for GeoSketch, and the context menu has settings. There's a GeoSketch settings context menu in which you can turn the AuxViews on and off. You can control their opacity, either setting it to 50% or 100%, or you can turn the entire layer of AuxViews off or on. And it's important to remember that you could turn all AuxViews off and turn off the layer, in which case to get the AuxViews back you need to do both in reverse. You need to turn the layer on and turn the AuxViews on. So for example, if we select the AuxView 100%, all of the AuxViews are now at full opacity. There's also an opacity tool that allows you to have more control over the opacity. You can put the cursor in an AuxView and then just hold down the left mouse button. If you move it down, the opacity moves towards 0, and as you move it up, it moves to 100%, and you can do that to any of the AuxViews just by putting the cursor in it. You can also control the opacity of all AuxViews by typing in a percentage. So I could say 22% and hit the enter key. All the AuxViews are set to 22%, key in 50%, and they're set there. And as I mentioned in the previous video, we've put these commands in the plugin GeoSketch menu so that they can be assigned shortcuts So I have F5 for AuxViews to 50%, F6 for 100%, and then F4 for toggling the AuxViews on and off. So if I hit F6, the AuxViews go to 100%, F5, they go to 50%, and F4, I can toggle them on and off. So we mentioned that there is no coordinate system associated, or there is a coordinate system, but it's an arbitrary coordinate system associated with the camera models. So in the next video we're going to see how to find, for example, the ground plane of that coordinate system. And we should mention also that that coordinate system is not geolocated to the Earth. So we also will discuss, when we talk about the move tool, the ability to reorient the positions of the camera models so that it's geolocated on the Earth. There are 3 ways to get geolocation into SketchUp. You can use the default Google Earth import of SketchUp and you'll get your coordinate system geolocated on the Earth. And you can also do it by either importing a nadir image using the GeoSketch function or importing a shapefile. If it has geolocation information in it, your coordinate system will be geolocated to the Earth. So in the next video in this sequence, we will discuss the technique for finding the ground plane of the camera models.